Today we have with us Alice. And Alice, I met with having the pleasure to speak on her podcast. And after the conversation, I was like, you've got to come on Real Talk with Katie Kim because people have got to understand what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. So we have been talking for a while. She just got done and just got off the waters. And so we're so excited. I may be joining, I'm going to be looking into crew. So in the Austin area, putting that out there for everybody for my public display of accountability, my PDA. And Alice, I want to stop the squirrels from our conversation. And I want to have you introduce yourself first to our audience, what you do, how you got into it. And let's start all things of your origin story before we dig in, because we had to literally, listeners, we had to pause so we could get started so we can continue the conversation. So let's go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm very excited to be here, so I appreciate it. And hello to all your listeners. So I am a mediator and arbitrator and negotiation coach. So I sort of do all of those. And while it might sound like, oh, she does all these different things, most of it is communication. Right? I feel like negotiation is a higher level of communication. You're trying to persuade someone to do something. And we do negotiations every day, all day long. So for those of you who are like, I don't really negotiate a lot. Well, if you've ever talked to your friend to say, hey, what time shall we meet for coffee? That's a negotiation. It might be small, it might be smaller stakes, but that's still a negotiation, right? Or what time shall we have dinner? Or what do you want to have for dinner? That's also a negotiation. So we're constantly negotiating. And I also do mediations. I mediate. I'm very, very passionate about resolving conflict between parties. So I do divorce mediation, workplace conflict mediation. And then after that, I also help people with communication and negotiation. So that's sort of like me in a nutshell. My origin story is that my parents are immigrants from Okinawa, Japan. I ended up growing up in southern Louisiana, so a little bit closer to you, Katie, than where I am right now. And I was a huge theater fan. So I started off acting at age 13, went all the way, got a degree in acting in college, became a director, moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I became artistic director for a small theater company out here. So I was acting and directing out here. And then eventually, after many, many other adventures, eventually ended up as a mediator.
So I have this slide in the masterclass I teach, and it is these books that, and I may be dating myself, but they were like choose your own adventure books, where it was like, if you want them to go through the left door, turn to page 6. If you want them to go down the hall, turn to page 9. And I feel that like a lot of times when we talk with people who are accomplished and in their field, and you think like, wow, like she must have just been doing this. And it's like, no, there's a choose your own adventure story. Like there's some turns, there's never a straight path. And God uses everything, right? So it's all those experiences when you come in is making you who you are today, the skill set, the perspective, everything you bring to the table has all been that process and that story. So when you were saying about the acting, I was like, oh, I bet that helps you get into, I don't want to say the character, the person across the table, your client, get into their mindset and be like, how do I relate to where you are, what you're going through? And yet this is what the other side of the table sees. I don't know if I'm projecting that, but that's kind of where when you're talking, I'm like, oh, that's really good.
Well, so you're close. You actually are onto something, right? So what we do in Actor Studio is that we learn to read emotions like in a split second, because sometimes you can be like kind of upset and then 2 seconds later you've already moved on, your emotions have changed. So we've been trained, we've been trained to like read all the emotions like in the seconds that they're happening.
Wow.
And so when I'm doing a mediation, I'm able to read what's happening. We're also trained to create subtext for our characters. So the subtext is, what am I actually trying to say, but I'm not saying, right? So it's my tone, the words that I'm choosing, but there's something that I want. And there's also my objective. Like as a character, my objective might be, oh, I want to look good on this podcast, perhaps, right? So everyone has an objective. So I am trying to really read all of the parties' objectives, their subtext, and the emotions that are happening in the room. So that gives me a lot more information than just the word.
Oh, that's good. So, and there's so much to dive into that. So when you start to, what is the majority? I know you have a breadth of different, I would say, like clients of different mediation, like you said, divorce, and there's always real estate in the mediation, because I'm sure some of my listeners are like, okay, this is why we go to mediation, or we go to mediation before arbitration, before, like, to step into that. So like, where do you think what's like lights you up? Like which of those is like, I love a good.
Right. So it's funny that everyone asks that question, because they're like, which one is your favorite? And you're not going to expect my answer. My answer is, I love the variety. If I had to just pick one and only do that one forever, I'd be like, oh, I can't stand it. So I love, because it's all new. Like one day I might be doing a real estate one. Another day I'm doing a divorce. Another day I'm doing workplace conflict. So it's really the variety for me that is the spice of life. I love having different things. I mean, that's why mediation is my third career. So I had a graphic design career in between theater that I didn't even mention.
Oh my God. Yes. We always like, oh yeah, that one. I did that thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're in the same path, because same thing. If I had to do the same project, if I had to do the same development, no, like that's a hard no for me. And even if people say, like, we did the same building, like shell plan, if you will, 5 times, and each time I'm like, nope, I can't do exactly like that. We got to switch something up. We got to make it different. And there's always that like intent, right? And that's where I have to believe that when people come in terms of that mediation, it is that, what is the intent that you went into the partnership relationship and deal with, what happened, and then where are we at now? Right? And how do you bridge that in all of it?
Well, so in divorces, it's different, because everyone's intention in the divorce mediation is to get a divorce, right? Not to like fix anything, right? So this is what's interesting, because with divorce mediations, people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that because it's like so high conflict. And I'm like, no. It's much easier, because everyone has the same goal, which is, we want to get divorced. Now you got to figure out all the pieces, but they have the same goal. If you do workplace conflict mediations where people are not getting along at work, you may never get to a resolution, because if you and I have been mandated by HR to say, Katie and Alice, you're not getting along, you need to go to mediation, you might think, well, but my goal is to get Alice fired because she's a horrible person. And I might think, well, my goal is to get Katie fired because she's constantly like doing whatever wrong, right? So now we're going into mediation. We don't have the same goal. We are not there to try to work together. We actually don't like one another. And so it becomes much more difficult to resolve. And there's still a lot of emotion, right? Because you and I are probably spending at work more time together than married couples do in the home.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? 40 hours a week that people have to stay together. Yeah. So it's a lot more difficult and a lot more emotional potentially with workplace conflict, because they don't have the same goal.
And when you said that, like, not like our family, I think like when you're in the workforce, you're going to do a job and you don't really get to choose the other people you work with. So there's that, like, I don't want to get along with you, right?
Yes.
Like, there's no need to that. So I definitely relate to that. So then, and it makes me think of, also, we have a lot of business owners that listen to the podcast, and we have a lot of real estate investors. So when you say that, bringing in even that internal conflict, you mentioned like HR. One of my prayer warriors is an HR. So I think of, like, she's talking about, well, like, well, I would do this, I would do that, before it gets to that point. But there's a lot of times it gets to that point, whether it is in people that work in the company or it's even stakeholders like that. Have you had any kind of conflict in terms of the business side where, like, you're dealing with stakeholders and that? How does that? Because I can see that would be like intense.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've even had executive directors of nonprofits call me and say something like, hey, I just got hired, and I know that there's a complete mess going on over there, and I don't want to step into the mess. So I want to bring on a mediator to clean like the mess as I walk in the door. So literally, I came on board at the same time that the new executive director came on board, so that everyone who was upset about whatever they were upset about had a chance to talk to me, and had a chance to mediate with the people that they were having issues with, right? There's also been like times when board of directors are fighting. And so the president is fighting with the executive director. So then nothing can happen in the organization because like they're all blocking each other from getting any work done. So it can get kind of ugly.
Yeah. Can you go to politics now? No.
I know, right? I know.
We won't go there. We won't go there. But yeah, so where my brain goes is I just had a dear friend, Andrea Carpenter, on, and she is my next gen friend and helps with business succession planning. And what you're talking about, that is really great. I would say maturity in the role of that chief operating officer or that board president or the head of the nonprofit, because how many times do we have even going into a board as a board member, you're like, okay, there's like, you're inheriting all this jade, all this issues that you're like, it's not really moving us forward. How do we unpack that? You know, because slow down to speed up is one of my favorite phases with my clients, is like, how do you unpack that, get to the real problem, and then start to move forward? And I love that is a situation I wouldn't have thought to say, hey, let's bring in Alice for that.
Yep, definitely. When there is a mess and people are not getting along, or people have like conflicting goals, like they're not maybe like, let's say you've got two co-founders, and now, you know, I had one where the co-founders wanted to go in different directions. One of the co-founders was like, I want to build out a humongous team. I want to hire and hire and hire. I want to have like dozens and dozens of people, and I just want this to be a huge company. And the other founder was like, I want it to be just the two of us. Ooh. So they had to mediate and discovered that they are no longer in alignment. And then they had to break the company. And then once you just make that determination, then you have to determine who keeps the name, right? Because that's the brand is already out there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And what IP do you keep versus what do I keep? Because they're doing the same thing, but they're trying to grow in different directions. And so then they had to mediate all that as well.
So, and as listeners go like, okay, where does Katie's brain go now? Right. And so I'm thinking of a lot of my girlfriends and my accountability group. So I'm calling them out here quick, as some of them are looking to buy businesses that are in the process of buying businesses. And I know enter in the great transition of the baby boomers, right? We have a lot of people that own businesses and are looking to transition. And that's what Andrea does, is helps them think through that. But like, you bring a different aspect to that process. And one, I'm going to connect you ladies offline because I think you'd be assets to each other's circles. But, and how do you see, or have you worked with businesses that are in those transition points of, hey, we're looking to turn over our company. Maybe the buyer's coming in, the older, I don't know, how do I say it? The original boss, if you will, is staying on for a certain amount of time. And then, but yet the new one's coming in and they have all these, you know, we all have new things we want to do as the new owner. Like, have you stepped into those situations? And if so, like, how do you go into it? And what are some of the questions you ask people in that?
Right. So the answer is yes. And also they can be fairly messy because, and I'll tell you why. So if the owner is an original owner, they're basically selling their baby.
Yeah.
It's their baby. So it's not just a business transaction. It's like their child. And so there's a lot of emotions like stuck in there, right? They want the right buyer, but they want them to take care of it, and they want it to be done this way and that one that way. And then the buyer might say like, hey, I'm purchasing it. I want to change it. I want to run it the way I want to run it. But then there's like, no. We want you to run it like this way. We don't want you to get rid of that value. You know, we've created it so it looks like this. So then there's like that sort of push and pull happening.
Yeah.
Especially in situations where there's a longer transition. So it's not just like, okay, we're selling it and it's gone, but it's more like, hey, I want to stay on the board of directors. Well, beware, right?
Okay.
Because while the historical knowledge of that owner is fantastic, it might come with strings attached, which means like, I still want to control what you're doing. And so they're staying on board, not just to give you historical knowledge, but to still kind of control the operations from a different seat.
Yeah.
Right? And so then the buyer starts to feel constrained because they're like, I can't do what I want to do. I have a vision. Let's just say, for example, like right now there's AI. So let's say you buy a company and you're like, I got these great ideas. I'm really into AI. I think we can transform this business. We're going to bring in this. We're going to bring in that. And maybe the older owner is like afraid of AI. And they're like, no. We don't want you to do that. Please don't do that. So now they're sitting on your board. They have a certain amount of like, control, and they're
Yep.
telling you, no, please do not push my business into the AI space. I don't want it going there. And then what do? Right? And so while you can mediate it, sometimes it's really difficult to mediate values, right?
Oh.
It's not just a thing like a position where you can say, because in negotiation, most people who don't know how to negotiate well negotiate positions. Like your position might be, hey, Alice, let's take a trip to Mexico. And my position is, no, I want to go to Iceland. Now we're fighting about position. But if you want to go deeper, and this is a negotiation like strategy, you want to ask questions to find out what our interests are. And you might say, well, I want to go somewhere there's close. I want to go somewhere there's warm. And I might say, okay, fine. I'm okay with close. I'm okay with warm, but I don't want to go to Mexico. And then let's say we find based on our interests and there's an alignment, then we can pick a different place, right?
Yeah.
But if our values are different and we're like buying and selling a company, but I'm staying on the board of directors with some amount of control, but our values are different, it's difficult to even mediate that. If I say my value is throw away the old and bring in the new, and then your value is like, no, the old is what I cherish. This is like what I spent 30 years building. I don't want to throw it away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It makes me think of when we were, when I stepped into my family construction company, and we were intending to buy it, get there, learn the process, like, get the stripes, if you will, and figure out like what we would do. And I call it Legend of Bigfoot, and where it's like, well, we started wanting to change things and infuse some tech into the business. And you would think we were just like shifting 180 degrees. And it was, again, the Legend of Bigfoot is like, well, you put the yellow folder on the first file cabinet. Well, why did we put the yellow folder on the first file cabinet versus the second file? We've always put the yellow folder on that. Well, why? Like what you're saying, like you're seeking to understand, and nobody has real reason, right? And they're just like, we just do it, like don't question it, right? And so I look at like those mergers or those acquisitions like you're talking about, when you don't have, and I'm going to say a third party person like yourself who's not emotionally attached one way or another, right? You're not emotionally attached that it's your baby, right? And they're leaving the nest, or the nest is changing, right, if you will, the phrase. But then you also have the person coming in that has that energy, that has that ambition, and they see what that person has built, and they value it on some scale, right? They value it enough to buy it, but they don't have that origin of, creation and love. So it's a different, and sometimes I see them just butt heads. Like in our case, it definitely did, because it was like, yes, I've seen this go, but to succeed and to leverage our skill sets as the new owners, which are usually a different skill set than the person that created the business, like it has to morph, it has to change. And so how do you get that mindset shift when you're working with the new owner versus the old owner to kind of bridge that? Like, I see where you're coming from, I see where I'm coming from, kind of like what you're saying, like we want to go someplace warm, right? Like we want to go,
right.
Yeah.
So I would say before it gets completely entrenched in conflict, those conversations need to happen before there's even a deal.
Ooh.
Right? Like, are we actually in alignment? And to think about the vision that each person has, right? As opposed to, I love Katie's energy, she's fantastic, I'm going to pick her because I think she's great, she's a great leader. Like, that's not enough, right? It's more like, okay, what do you envision? What's your value? And you need to make sure that you create alignment before the deal happens. Because once the deal happens, if we find out that, hey, you've got this great energy, but you're going to take it in this direction, and I thought you were going to take it in this direction, I have the potential to actually thwart all your efforts, because I'm really pulling hard as a board of director, controlling it, pulling in this direction, and you're coming on saying, no, I want to go in this direction, and now we're at a tug of war, and now I'm slowing down your progress, right? Yeah. So before you even get to a deal, it's not just about, what's their credential, what can they do, how strong of a leader are they, what's their knowledge base. It's also, what is your vision, Katie, for my company? How are you going to implement it? What are you going to do? Are you keeping all my staff? Are you bringing all your own people? Is it going to a merger of like your staff plus my staff somehow together? Like all those things I think need to be discussed before there's a deal, because if you don't discuss that, there's a potential for it to blow up after everything's been signed. And now you're stuck going, I can't do anything because Alice is stopping me, right? And you're going to be very frustrated very quickly. And all of a sudden, like, the company's not going anywhere because you've got people putting the brakes on everything, which is where I come in. People come in and they're like, we can't move forward because we have so-and-so blocking us and so-and-so's blocking us. The other thing is you want to be extra, extra clear on intentions. And I say this because I had a nonprofit that came on board. It was the original founders from 30 years ago. It was their baby. And they wanted to get away. At the same time, they wanted to keep, control of it somehow. So the new person that they brought in, they said, you know what? In order to give you more leverage, this is their side. In order to give you more leverage, going out to fundraise and whatnot and look better in front of outside funders, we're going to give you the title of ED. But we're going to give you the title of ED so that you can go out there and raise money as the ED. That's it, right? Well, they didn't write any of this down. And guess what do you think the ED heard? The ED heard, oh, the entire board voted for you. You are legitimately the ED. So now you have an executive director who believes they're legitimately the 100% executive director. And then you have the two co-founders who are like, that was in name only. You don't have any of the power of an ED. We just wanted you to go out there and fundraise with the title ED so that people will give you money because you're showing up as the ED. And that was a very, very sticky mess.
Ouch.
Yes.
Yes.
So you want to make, if you're making any kind of deals like that, you want to make sure it's all written because they had different narratives.
Yes.
And there was no paperwork showing who was right. It was all he said, she said. They're like, no, we said we're just giving it to you on title only. And she's like, no, the entire board voted for me, so I'm legit.
Well, and I can see somebody then coming in as they're transitioning, right? To say, well, there's an ED in place. Like the ED knows everything that's going. So the ED is going to stay, right? Because they know the operations, all that, all the things, right? And we talk about those key employees. Like when you talk about when to bring you in that business set, when you said like, yeah, you evaluate the deal, you evaluate the company before you write that up to say, hey, bring me in. Let's talk about the values. Let's talk about getting that in. Because I think you're right. Like when you start to then dig into the details of the contract, it is like, we're going to make these changes. We need you on board, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to sign that, like, you're good. And knowing that, like, I can see there's so much power in the clarity of having that, like, how do I say, trajectory of like where they want to take the business in the deal, the financial legal deal, because now you're like, hey, we're doing what we said we're going to do, right? I think of when people, and I don't know why I'm bringing politics up a lot today. Maybe that's the mediation here, but like, it's what people can relate to. How's that? But like when people are like, oh my gosh, he's doing this, or she's doing this, and this. And it's like, but they can depend on that. Like, so they're doing exactly what they told you they were going to do. Right. So like, and how many times in business or negotiations do we, like you said, we talk about it, but we don't write it down. And then everybody gets surprised of like, oh my gosh, how could you do that? It's like, I told you I was going to do that. Like,
well, also if you're too high level in deal making and you don't get into the nitty gritty, you might get stuck in the nitty gritty once the deal is signed.
Oh, dig into that one because I know where my brain goes. Go a little deeper on that one, Alice, because that's gonna land. And I'm thinking of at least 5 people that are listening to this podcast that they're like, oh crap, she's talking about me. So, I am. Listen up, ladies.
Yeah, because it's like you know how they say, you know the phrase, the devil's in the details.
Oh, yes, evil
so
devil.
So when I mediate, people might say, oh, Katie, you want to sell me your business? Oh, I want to buy a business that's just like yours. And so like high level, we look like we agree.
Yeah.
Then you get more and more and more into the details. And all of a sudden, we're not in alignment like we thought we were, right? You might say, well, I mean, cost is like, that's still high level.
I'm talking first checkbox, right? That's the first checkbox that we have in there. Yeah.
It's more like, how are you going to do it? Who is coming on board? All these different things as you talk about it. And it's not as important if the person who is selling it is leaving. If they're selling it to you and they're getting out, not a big deal. But a lot of times people are like, I kind of want to stay on the board of directors. I kind of want to be on the fringe. And it sounds like a great deal because you're like, great, you know a lot more about how this is run. I'm happy to keep you on board. Like people like gravitate towards that, but then it fights them later.
Oh, it bites hard, right? It bites. Oh my gosh. There's sometimes I think of when we were looking to buy the business, there was one person, I'm not going to say their name, but like I was like, we have got to make sure that they stay with us. You know, like the company will just crumble. And then after we started to dig into it, I'm like, no, that person's got to go now. It was totally.
Yes. Yes. Totally. So it's
Yeah.
not always as good of a deal as you think.
Mhm.
It sometimes is even better to say, how about you are a consultant and when we need you, we can call you? Because
Ooh,
then you are removing a certain amount of control that
yeah,
the seller can keep if they stay on your board. Does that make sense?
I like that. I
Because
like
as
that.
a consultant, they're like one more degree removed. So they
Yes.
can't block you from doing things. And at the same time, if you're like, oh, I need that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, what were they doing or how do they do it? You can call them up and they can be your consultant. But it's like a little bit dangerous if you keep them on the board and they've got some certain amount of control over what you're doing,
Yeah.
because they might end up steering the boat for you in a direction that you do not want to go.
Okay, so when you are talking that point, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, which I like to play often. Is like, okay, but I feel like I need this owner to be in the business because they know the clients, they know the people. I'm not gonna be at the business every day. How would you step into that?
So, but why couldn't you get all of that if they were your consultant?
I don't think it would have buy-in. Like we really want them, we really want to grow the company. And so like we need them. They're the heartbeat. It's their names on the wall kind of thing.
Going into that, you have to just know in your heart
Mhm.
that if they start taking the steering wheel away from you, you kind of have to be like, okay, what is the trade-off? Right? The trade-off of keeping their energy, their institutional knowledge, and is the trade-off letting go of the steering once in a while. If you're okay with that, then you can make those deals. But if you're like, there's no way that I want someone else steering the boat. When I come in, I want to steer the boat. You need to weigh which benefit is stronger for your company.
Ooh,
And so
yeah.
you have to make those very hard decisions because sometimes you can't keep both. Because if you keep the person on board because they're the lifeblood and this, that, and the other, you may have to give up steering once in a while.
I like control, Alice.
Some people do. And so if you like control, then you
Yeah.
might consider maybe not keeping those people as a board of director, right?
Yeah.
A member of the board, because then you will have to give up control. So you have to think about like, which do I want? So it's not that one is inherently wrong. And I'm not saying don't do it, but you have to understand what are the risks involved if you're keeping the old owner around and in the business and working the business, because they might take over because they're like, yeah, you know what, Katie, I don't like how you're doing these things. I'm going to switch. And it might not be in alignment with your vision, but now you kind of have to be like, well, I made the decision to let them on. Or you have some kind of a plan in place where like they gradually have less and less time until they exit. So you should definitely plan the exit before you even start. Do not just put them in, because now you're going to be like, how do we get them out? Right? So you want to set up an exit plan where after 6 months, they have this fewer hours or less amount of percentage or whatever it is, right? And then another year, who knows? Maybe you want 3 years, but you want to make sure that there's an exit plan, an exit strategy
Yes.
for them.
Okay.
Because the last thing you want is to say, you're on board for as long as you want because we love you, Katie. You can stay on board as long as you want. And all of a sudden you're going to be like, I'm on board forever. And then you're like driving the boat. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything that I want to do. And I'm getting blocked. And then I'm miserable. I'm upset. And then there's conflict. So I always am a firm believer that conflict can be resolved before it happens. You just have to have the wherewithal to think through, like, okay, because everyone likes to be rosy in the beginning, right? Like, oh,
everybody's good friends. That's
fantastic. Yes, right? When you're getting married, I love you, you love me, we're going to stay together forever. But you have to think of contingencies, what ifs. Even if you don't want to think about it, like, what if we don't get along? How do we plan an exit? What if this? What if that? Right? And plan all those out. And then you won't need a mediator because you've already planned those contingencies of like what's going to happen if things go sideways.
Got it. So is that where like your mediation coach part comes on, where you go in proactively? so you don't then end up mediating between the parties.
My negotiation coaching, yes.
The negotiation. Sorry, I phrased that wrong. So your negotiation coaching goes in. So if, for example, I love when you say, I have to pause for a second because I love when you say you got to know your exits. I am like a flight attendant. Like before we go, you got to know all your exits, where you're at here, like pick them all out. And when we talk with our clients, we have a joint venture structuring meeting if they're coming in with people for a partnership. And I said, okay, we're throwing this on the table. Everybody's going to die 20 times in this conversation, right? Like, just let's go. And sometimes I'll come home with my husband. I'm like, I died 50 times today. And he's like, oh, okay. It was a good day, huh? I'm like, yeah, it was great. But you think about that, right? Is like, okay, there's so many things, Alice, that I'm thinking right now where you have the first checkbox, right? The company, the deal, this is what we want. This is in alignment. Yes. Now we're starting to look, and then you go strictly business. But there's so much, as you're talking about in coaching them through that, is to say, okay, when you get, I would see like a letter of intent, this is terms are high level, here we go. And then having you come in and coach both parties about just asking the questions that are going to come up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not, if they come up, they are going to come up. Let's talk about right now, how do we step into that? How do we want to show up, and make sure that we're all in alignment? Because I feel, and I can see that makes a stronger transition in the company, because you're starting to ask those closet questions, right? Like, okay, so are you really on board with technology, right? Are you really wanting to go here? And there can be dialogue, and I'm sure there's dialogue and conversation, because there is in real estate negotiation, where every party thinks they're being clear, right? And now everybody's thinking about every conversation they ever had with their spouse, their friend, or their doctor or somebody, right? It's like, I was clear. No, you weren't. You said this when really everybody heard this. Like you're talking about the ED story, right? Yeah. They thought they're now empowered and they're going to do this. Well, they thought no this. And so having somebody, third party like yourself, not be emotional, go deep into those questions, put them in the agreement.
Yes. That's so important. You want to document it, because otherwise it becomes he said, she said. Well, in that meeting that we had 6 months ago, you said this, and you're going to be like, I never said that. And I'll be like, I've been operating under the premise that you were in alignment. And you're like, no, sorry, Alice, never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. You're dreaming, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like so far apart. And how did this happen? So it's so important to just document, like, hey, Katie was in alignment with the technology, or Alice wanted this, or Alice is going to hire 10 more people, and this, that, and the other. Otherwise, we're going to be like, no, because people, their minds change and they don't realize their minds change. And they'll be like, I don't remember saying that. I don't agree with that. But at least if you have it written down, you can be like, look, you said it. It's right here.
Well, and I think half the time my brain's like, I hear one thing and I'm starting to think about like, but all the offshoots, right? Like as the entrepreneur brain, I'm thinking of, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And like, you're still talking about the same linear thread. And I don't hear, you could be talking A through F, and I'm like, I heard A through B, and then I'm going on this, right? And now it's like, no, come back over here and have them sign off on that, right? In the agreement, sign off. So then do you recommend that being like an exhibit to the agreement? Like, is this like a growth plan, or like how does that get curated into the document?
That's a good question. I feel like that's a lawyer question, but I think an exhibit to the exhibit, an exhibit would be a great place to put it, because you kind of want it all together, right? And it's kind of, I want you to think of, or your people to think about it like a prenup or a postnup in a marriage.
It's the same, really. I mean, it's a legally binding relationship, right?
Yes. And it's the same thing. It's about the growth, right? And how, because it's interesting, because when people hear prenup, they automatically think, oh, Katie's got a lot of money, she needs a prenup. But I'm like, no. The prenup is about what grows during the marriage. So a prenup for a business would be the same thing, right? Like how the business grows once you're operating together.
I like the business prenup. I like that.
Right. So you have to say, hey, because, here's an interesting story is that somebody was like, hey, we need to do a prenup. And I gave them the paperwork to say, ask each other these questions. Like you said, the questions that are in the closet that no one wants to ask. So they just are like, this feels so good. Let's just pretend like we don't have all these questions to ask, and let's just go with it. And a lot of people get married that way. They go into business that way. Like, it's amazing how often people just don't ask the questions. And so shortly after those questions were sent, I got a response back saying, we're not getting married anymore. And so the devil's in the details, because it might be that once you dig into those details, you're going to be like, oh, this is not the right person I want to go into business with, because even though on the high level we love each other, we agree with everything, the way we're going to do it, we are very, very different, right?
Oh, I love that. So I have a couple stories I want to share with you. One is my husband and I are Catholic, so we have pre-Cana before you get married. And Father Terry was giving us this quiz we were supposed to take before one of our sessions. And then it's a compatibility, right? To say like, okay, what did your fiance answer? What did you answer? And there was this one about like what happens if your spouse cheats, and like we're getting divorced. Like it was just like, that's my answer. That was B, C, whatever it was. And Charles picked the same one. And Father Terry was like, no, like our faith tells us we need to work through this. And I'm sitting, I'm like, we get out in the parking lot. I'm like, you cheat? Like, I know people who pour concrete. Like I'll be a widower, but I won't be a divorcee. And I'm like, that's where I stand. Are we good? Like, and we went forward. So I think of that when that Kim's back. I'm like, oh, he still loves me. He's still married, but we're not
to be buried in concrete.
Not me. Yeah, we're not. Charles is. People are like, is Katie pouring concrete today? No. But then I think about one thing that on the business side, because when I do developer for fee and I work with people that are either putting together a development for the first time or they're taking their business to the next level, they're adding real estate as a revenue source, they're more than likely bringing in some investors, some other people to the table. And so we have the pre-attorney meeting a lot of times where it's like, let's sit down, let's talk about these questions. And now it's about 110 questions. I usually don't tell people going in because they're like, okay, when are we done? Because those questions, fork off to other questions, as you know. And I think about when you say you give your clients that, questionnaire, it's like, hey, answer this, answer that. I've now turned that into a custom GPT. And I tell them like, you answer these questions, give me, send me the document at the end of it and give us to your partner in the same thing. And so how that GPT goes through is it's like, if you don't know the answer, there's another document that gets produced with it that says, we don't know these questions. We don't know the answers to these questions. And now when they come to meet with me, because again, it's kind of like marriage counseling a little bit, it's like they have their answers, they have their answers, and we then discuss it together. And then those documents then go to their attorney to help draft up their agreement docs, right? And to say like, how are you going to show up? And we haven't done those as exhibits. Now I'm thinking about them, like that'd be kind of good to have that one conversation doc go in there, but it goes through those questions like, okay, what happens if and I'm taking this to like a business real estate side in here. What happens if there's a cash call and nobody's got cash?
Right.
And nobody thinks that, right? You don't think of the divorce when you're getting married. You think of the wedding ceremony.
Yes, correct.
So, my job, again, I don't mean to kill them 20 times in the conversation, but it's like, that's going to happen sometime, guys. Or what happens if, tenant defaults? How are we going to handle that? Are we going to go after so many days? Like, it's all those questions from the scars of being in the game and doing this for so long that we know because we see, and we have the benefit, I call it a benefit, of like that exposure into multiple people's businesses, multiple people's relationships, how they went right, how they went wrong, and helping guide people to avoid those tragedies, those hiccups, the school of hard knocks, if you will, so they don't have to pay that tuition.
Yeah, and I also want to add that a lot of times people might go into real estate with their family members because they're like, oh, it's my sister, it's my brother, like we trust each other, we get along great. And I'm like, beware, because just because you get along does not mean that you do business together like well, right? And so like they're doing less vetting because they feel like, oh, well, I've known my brother my entire life and he's like a good guy. But you don't do business, like you haven't done business together, and how you run things in real estate might be very, very different. Like I know a story where one sibling was like, let's accept Section 8 because for sure we're always going to get like lots of people for Section 8. And the other brother was like, no way. So now they're off to the races fighting.
Yes.
Because they're fighting about who to accept as a tenant.
Well, and in the family dynamic, and I've made that mistake. I've invested with family. So like that's a whole therapy session on that too. Good and bad. Like it's gone good, it's gone bad. But in those questions, and it made me realize other questions to ask even my non-family member investors, right? Is to say, okay, hey, again, we're dying a couple times during these conversations, right? So if you become dismembered or pass away, who gets your shares?
Right.
Does it pass to your wife? Does it pass to your kids? And now you think like, I don't want to be in business with your kids, right? And so my sister and I are totally different career paths, totally different personalities. And everybody who's listening to this that knows us is laughing. They're like, yes. So when I went into a deal with my parents, part of our contract was like, if you pass away, you know, God forbid, far future, but if you pass away, I buy you out, or I buy you out with my part of the inheritance, or like there's no way that my sister comes in and has 50% of this development, right? Because no, that's not like, no, I'd rather forfeit my money and forfeit my shares because I know it's not going to work.
Right.
So when you go into those deals, if you don't know their spouse, if you don't know their kids, you don't know if you want to be in business with them or you don't. So you have to go in with all exits in mind.
Yes.
Right? And most of the time in family situations, we don't have those difficult conversations well.
Right. And that's when a mediator is helpful. So if anyone's like, oh, it doesn't have to be like a huge conflict, right? It can be like, we need to get this deal done. We're family. We're kind of talking over each other. We get into arguments and someone starts yelling at someone else or whatever. That's a perfect scenario where you bring in a third party neutral. They facilitate the conversation, make sure everyone is listening, make sure everyone is heard, make sure everyone has equal opportunity to talk and present their ideas, and then get to a final agreement, right? There's definitely a process that helps when people are doing that kind of thing and finding that they're struggling. Just call a mediator.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean, that's where like, don't take it on yourself. Why do we try and take it on? And you're going to get more clear than they ever will. Even though they know these people, you're going to ask those questions. You're going to make them get uncomfortable, which is, we know we're growing, right? They're going to make them get uncomfortable. You're going to say, is that really what you want? And as you mentioned, you're going to look for those acting cues, right? You're going to look for those like nonverbal, like you're saying that, but your body's telling me this.
Yes.
So let's dig into this, right?
Yes.
And as an empath, I always warn my clients, I'm like, oh, I'm going to feel your hesitation before you speak it. So just know we're going to dig deeper in that. And I love that, because that's what people need more to get the clarity that they feel they already have in the agreement.
Right. Yeah. Like I had one where there was a couple that came in and the woman came in and announced, hey, if we can't figure this deal out today, there's a husband and wife. She said, I'm going to get a divorce. So we go into a mediation, and for the next 2 hours, she's actively preventing it from resolving. And like he kept moving and moving and moving, and she was not negotiating. She just held her position and held her for 2 hours. So then, like you said, as the mediator, I was like, okay, let me get this straight. You walked in the room, you announced that you were going to get a divorce if this didn't resolve. I said, then you proceed to spend the next 2 hours making sure it's not resolving. So I said, my question is this: if you got everything you asked for, he says 100%, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Would you be happy? And she thought about it for like half a minute, which felt like an eternity.
Yeah, the silence of like,
said, yes. Finally, she said, and I think that no one had asked her that question before. Not the therapist, not the husband. Like that, probably the question, I'm guessing the question that was being asked of her was, do you want to work on the marriage? And I believe she kept saying yes. And so now they're showing up. So I said, would you be happy? And her response after thinking about it was, it would just relieve some pressure. And so he said, I got my answer. We're done with this mediation. I'm going to go call a lawyer. Right? Because I found the little thing that was hiding somewhere that no one could find.
Yeah, that's where when we were talking the first time on your podcast, I was like, ooh, she's got some magic in her questions that she does. And so love this conversation. And we could go on more, and I may want to have you back just for horror stories. Maybe that would be a fun one to do. But I appreciate your time, Alice. And where can people find you? Because I know some people are in deals that are listening to this podcast. I know they're like, ooh, I need to slow down to speed up. I need Alice to come in, have this conversation, make sure everything is on the table and per Alice in your agreements. So where can they find you? Where can they reach out to you?
Sure. Shakina, Shikina, mediation.com is where they can find me, or they can just connect with me on LinkedIn, Alice Shakina. And I'm happy to have conversations with anyone who is interested in talking.
I love it. Love it. And we'll put those links in the show notes and all the captions and all the places. So you'll definitely be able to look at that. If you're not seeing them, go to YouTube because for sure we'll have that on there. I know that's the one place we do. And wanted to say thank you, Alice, for being here. It was a pleasure. I'm gonna I got my crew inquiry that I'm gonna go find about and get on some rowing, but I love talking with you and hearing the stories and learning about how to step into these negotiations and agreements on the proactive side in order to prevent the reactive side. So
Yes, definitely. And even though we didn't really bring up the word negotiation that much, I want your listeners to understand that all the details are the myriad negotiations that happen underneath the one big umbrella of a negotiation.
Oh, absolutely. When you just said that, I think of my 13-year-old. I'm like, yes, the myriad of everything he does in his life is negotiating with me. Like that's his thing. So, but definitely. So I appreciate your time and thank you so much for coming on. And if Alice hit a chord with you, and if you're in the middle of a negotiation or if you're about to go into it, definitely reach out to Alice so she can help guide you through that. Awesome.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, if someone in your world needs this conversation, a founder who's carrying a lot and ready for clarity, send this episode to her. These messages land deeper when we share them. And if you're in that space where you know your business can grow, you feel the potential, but the next strategic step isn't fully clear yet, let's talk. You don't need a new identity. You don't need to force a direction. You just need clarity that's aligned with your goals, your numbers, and the life you want to lead. I invite you to book a call with my team. We'll look at where you are, identify the real leverage points, and map the smartest next move, whether that's one of our free resources, a workshop, or deeper support. Clarity creates momentum. Let's get yours. Let's go. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice. It's not financial advice. It's not investment advice. Real estate development, like any investment, carries risk. Before you make decisions, you should always consult a licensed professional, your attorney, your CPA, or your financial advisor, to name a few, to make sure you're making the right choice for your situation. I'm here to share insights and strategy, but you're responsible for your own decisions, and each situation is unique. So make sure you contact your professional team to give you your specific guidance for your specific case, as each real estate development's different and unique and has its own challenges and opportunities.